Thanks, everybody. Thanks to the Zell series. Thanks to all of you for coming. Thanks to CD and Forrest. For those of you who don't know, One Pause has a grant from the community to do these conversations, and I always ask the same questions. And the questions, they're not always necessarily liked by the poets. But it's kind of a cool thing that all these different poets that we've had over the years are answering these same questions. I am going to mix it up a little bit today and ask specific questions to each one of them. So just to change it a little bit. But at any time, you can also jump in and ask a question or say, I want more clarification. It's a conversation as a group. And then the conversation will be on our website as a part of the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation's support. We also have support from Michigan Council of the Arts and Cultural Affairs, and we have support from White Lotus Farms, where the reading is tomorrow. So I told them I would just briefly introduce them. C.D. Wright has written over a dozen books of poetry, and she's won a MacArthur Fellowship and a Lenin Literary Award and all sorts of other things, and she's one of my favorite poets. Also, Forrest Gander, her husband, they're married, they started Lost Roads Press together. He has also written many books and was a geology major, and he's won a Guggenheim and National Endowment for the Arts grant, and he's also a translator of more than one different kind of language. Anyway, welcome them, and thanks again. So, I'm just going to jump in. Here's the first question.
Sound is good?
Sound good?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you guys can just answer whoever wants to go first. Together. What
Try not to do that.
Yeah.
I've already done
So this is everybody here is really smart because you're at the university, but this is just a very simple question. What does it mean to make a poem?
You know, I think if you knew, then it would become a really boring process, that the act of creation it has to keep some mystery for you, or you become just a professional. So it's definitely a wrestling match with language, often outside the context of thinking of an audience or anything else, for me. What about you, Steve?
It's, well, the frustrating part of it and the pleasure of it is that you never know what you're doing. And so but you go at it anyway, you turn to at it. And often, sometimes the yield is not worth keeping, but often if you stay with it a while, you get something that pleases you and something that maybe will please somebody else. Or maybe you even get a little savage insight, fleetingly, and you nail it to the page, and you do it, you know, for me it's kind of, otherwise it's sort of one word at a time. It's moving rocks and then removing them because they're not in the right position, but I still like the process. I think it's partly a manual process.
One of the things Robert Creedy said that I liked a lot was, I see as I write, so that you don't know, what you're writing until you're in the act of doing it. Just as you don't, like I have no idea what I'm saying until I'm in the middle of saying it. And that if you plan it out ahead of time, you end up with something different, and maybe something that's less surprising than expected to be.
The next one is, what is the role of beauty in a poem? Some people get mad about this one.
No, it's a good one. I like it.
Well, beauty can be really ugly.
Yeah.
So, I'm still quite smitten with beauty, but a lot of the things that I think are beautiful, many people would call ugly. So it's not a stable perception. It's just like, you're writing to learn something you didn't know, and you're seeing something you didn't look at. You didn't look at it in enough isolation or in enough context to see how wondrous it was.
I think about this too, like what is beauty? And there's, a million books on aesthetics and that question. But I think when it comes to art, often when we say it's beautiful or that we're looking for beauty, that it's the equivalent of saying that it works. When it works, it's beautiful, that something is functioning and doing something extraordinary in whatever medium is taking place. There's that thing Lao Tzu says, that those who are not in constant awe, surely some great tragedy will befall them. And I think that is connected to that sense of perception of beauty, of the miraculous, often in the ordinary.
How do,
Oh, is that better?
thanks. How do sound and image intersect when you're writing? Like, is that clear? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Does one come first, or do they come together?
Well, the effort is to bring them together. If you're working maybe initially with something you see, then you're trying to find the right sound for it. You're always trying to find the right sound. It's kind of a question of synesthesia in a way. But I don't think that, I think it's not as hard to bring them together as it is to separate them.
What's the matter? Why would you want to separate them? Like, what do you mean? Like, just to make it clear. Sorry.
Yeah, I can't answer that.
Okay.
I don't want to separate them. I'm very interested in the sound of what I'm seeing.
Right. Yeah.
George Oppen talks a great deal about clarity being what's most important to him. But he definitely doesn't mean the separation of the senses or even of experience. So his work is a constant coming together of thought and syntax and image. I was thinking that image and sound are really just two things, and themselves they're really complex, because image is not just like the image that you're describing, but the image on the page, of the words on the page, and the space that they're using. And sound is not just the sound that a poem might reference, of course, but also very much the sound of the language, which creates a texture, which is tactile, so that's involved also. And I think all of that it's like Heracles when he gets the task of cleaning the Aegean stables, that it's this rich pit of shit, and what he does is he gets all those rivers of the tactile and the sound and the image running through it to create a clarity that is really a compaction of total sense.
Right. And there's not. There's like, I loved what you said about the way the words are on the page is visual too, and that's that's part of it as well. So,
Right, yes, yeah, it's your, yeah, that's your visual field.
right.
Which is also connected to the sound because that the caesuras are breaking the sound, providing a rhythmical intention.
I have a friend, Melina Morling, who came here, and she actually has synesthesia, so when she
Hmm.
sees words, they're colored. So like the number 5 is red, and sometimes if she reads a poem that has a lot of vowels, like O's, it becomes very white, according to her. So that's kind of interesting too. She was here, she answered all about that. She said, well, I see, and these are the colors that I see.
There's, I was just talking to Mike Gustafson and his wife, his name, I don't remember his name was upstairs. There's a poet named Lars Gustafson who was in Providence once, and a synesthetic poet who lived there, who also saw words on people's foreheads and auras, came up to him and said, I see a word on your forehead. It's boring. He's not a boring boy. But I've heard that babies, that when we're born, all of us are synesthetic, and that as the brain develops, it begins to particularize and that doesn't happen completely with some people like your family.
I still think it's such a strange comment to say someone has synesthesia, like it was, as if it were an affliction or a diagnosis. Yeah.
Okay, great. Next question. So this next question is about translation, and it can be about actual translation from one language to another, or the translation of experience, using other people's voices and experiences. Just the questions just talk about it.
Well,
Just talk about translation.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not a bona fide translator. I mean, I have recently translated a book from the Spanish with someone who just finished the program here at the University of Michigan. And it really worked out well, working in tandem with him. But I mean, as far as serving as something of a conduit for other voices, I'm sort of practiced at that. I don't know that I call that translation. It just means being receptive and having a pretty good filter, or at least activating your filter when it's most needed.
Do you think that kind of receptivity is different from her first question about what is it to make a poem?
Well, it's a piece of what it is to make a poem.
Do you, a lot of people have talked about your work as like documentary poetics. Is that fitting in with what you're talking about there too?
Well, I mean, a number of my books have what I call a documentary inflection, or they have a subject which is comes from an actual situation, environment, a particular population, or set of circumstances. So that's the documentary inflection. I take all the license a poet can take to make a go at it.
I really like that term of thinking about translation as receptivity. I do translation a lot and look at translations a lot, and I'm interested in the process, and which often seems to me much more of a spiritual activity than a scriptural activity, because it's really trying to be receptive, to be so receptive that you can hear the music of someone else's mind, and then you sort of have to disappear to do that. It's a kind of act of humility to get yourself out of it so you can hear clearly what's going on there before you come back to the process with everything that you've ever learned. try to bring it into your own language, but an act of receptivity.
Yeah, Forrest is a much more experienced translator than I am, including working with native speakers of languages that he doesn't actually know. But for me, working with, more than a modicum, but not enough Spanish to be a really good Spanish translator, and then working with an American poet, born in Mexico. I think what was exciting, I think that is true, that you're trying to get in, hear somebody else's thinking. And the other thing is that what's pleasing about it is that you're learning something. So it's exciting, because you're learning something in ways that if you're just addressing your own poetry, you're not learning.
Great, thanks. I'm going to totally shift gears here. The next question is, what was the first poem you ever wrote, and what were the circumstances?
Well, the first poem I ever wrote and the first good poem I ever wrote were separated by about 20 years. My mom, I grew up in a house of women, my mother and two sisters. My mom was a school teacher and her father was a Swede who liked to walk around the house reciting 19th century poems. One he used to sail no, I can't do it anymore. They were fabulous. But she used to read Edgar Allan Poe and Carl Sandburg to me, so I started writing bad poems at a really early age. And it wasn't until I was in college, my freshman year, we were married, that thinking of myself as a real poet, I showed my professor some of my poems, and he looked at them and looked at me and said, "These are terrible." And it was the first time that really good that somebody said that to me, because I thought, oh, this isn't just an act that I can perform myself. I need to be reading seriously. But then I still don't think I wrote a good poem until I was really sick in Mexico, and I was there with CD, and I was lying in bed puking my guts out, and I wrote a good poem.
It was good, and he was way sick. And he kept saying, "You're just saying that because I'm sick." And I promised him that even if he were dying, I wouldn't say that if I didn't mean it.
That's what kind of friends you want.
I would say, "This is terrible. You can go now." I just wrote stuff. I mean, it really had no shape or form. And so it had a lot of colloquial voice in it. It was very vernacular. And I think it took moving around to learn distinctions between the good, the bad, the ugly, and being exposed to more and more contemporary poetry and more poetry in different traditions before I actually had a handle on it.
Thanks. You've already kind of talked about this a little bit, this next question. Talk about frustration, the time when you experienced the failure of language. A lot, I don't know. The failure.
Experiencing the failure.
The failure of language.
It's pretty much on a daily basis here. Yeah, the thing that Italian poet Pavese says, that most of art is just a constant crucifixion. It's just failing and dying and failing and dying and hoping that there'll be something that you can get sometime. That is exactly how I feel about the process. I've told Carolyn that, I would love to just, at this point in my life, sit in front of my computer and watch my work take place. But it doesn't. So it's mostly through failure.
Well, failure's instructive. You just have to be really burning to want to make something good, something better than you have the capacity to at the moment. You just have to be burning with that, like you want it to just glow. And most of the time it doesn't glow, but you just keep pushing toward something that's really just beyond your reach. You can glimpse it, you can almost touch it, maybe you can even smell it, but it's just outside your current, capacity. So I think you have to want big, want big, beautiful, blue, luminous things to come of that rather tedious effort.
Cormac McCarthy has a nice thing that he says. It has to do with that largeness, and that the intention in your heart has to be large enough to, I don't know what the word, to deal with, to handle, to accommodate every false turning.
I'm going to deviate from my concrete 10 questions that I have here and ask another one, the new one. Forrest, lately people have been talking about your work in terms of ecopoetics, and I already mentioned documentary poetics for UCD, but could you two talk about your work, these in terms of these definitions, and maybe say for you what they are, because I feel like that gets linked to both of you, and I'd like to hear from you guys what it is for you.
Right, what is the definition of ecopoetics or ecological poetics? It's pretty broad. There's been a couple conferences that have showed, that people are approaching what that means from really different directions. But I think it has to do with, all of it has to do with the sense that we're living at a time of unprecedented ecological crisis, and that a writer might feel responsible to that, because we're implicated in that, just as we're implicated in war right now, and in other things. But it can also be turned into a kind of slogan, a kind of marketing slogan, for identifying groups of people, or a kind of a posturing. I think that one of the distinctions that there's a kind of nature writing, I won't mention any names, but a kind of nature writing where a person, walks out of the house and sees a flower and has an orgasmic experience and comes back in and writes a poem saying that, and that our relation, that's a kind of cannibalism, and that our relation to the world outside us has to be much more deeply phenomenological than that. And there can be different strategies in language for trying to express that kind of impacted relationship, the difference between, Descartes' I think, therefore I am, as if you could just be somewhere and think, not in relation. And, that's really a notion that your thinking is always already engaged with the world. So I think that poetics is, that one one strained in contemporary poetics is very interested in investigating that and the kind of poetry that might come out of it.
Well, I think most poets in some form or another are trying to address the crises of their time. And, I'm not sure that I know what ecopoetics is. But I know that there is a kind of new pastoral going on. I know that there is a new, more politicized kind of writing that's, trying to be heard, but it still can be very, very artful. I think everyone at this point knows that there is a global crisis, and we are facing major extinctions now, and it's us, we're doing it too. It's not just the owners of, the big capital, we're all doing it. And so I think everyone feels some kind of role as a citizen to see if there's, what can we save? This is a pretty nice planet. I grew up in, the Arkansas Ozarks. That's a 1.25 million acre hardwood forest. So and I just wrote a little manuscript on beech trees. And so I learned a lot about sort of the peril that trees are going through. And, if we don't save the trees, we're done for. I heard someone was wearing a T-shirt of bees saying, regarding the collapse of the colonies, saying, if we go, we're taking you with us. It seems pretty obvious to me. And there's such a tremendous range of poetry, as I've always said, especially in America. Our demographics would sort of suggest that was inevitable. But people really are looking at things through a new lens, and I think the more imperiled things are, the more eyes have to be on it. Of course, poets are not going to change the direction that we're moving in, but they're going to be part of the procession.
That's great. Next question. It kind of goes along with what you've been talking about already. So it is September 11th today. So there's this famous line, to write a poem after Auschwitz is barbaric, so that's Adorno. So then Jerry Rothenberg said, after Auschwitz, there is only poetry. Is there anything that poetry can't approach? Or maybe I should add also, is there something it should be approaching more than it is right now?
Well, I don't think there's anything that's outside poetry's purview. Even Ezra Pound proved that. However wacko his economics and other perspectives might have been, he was still had a very holistic vision. That quote of Adorno's, Adorno himself recanted it. So I don't know why he's always stuck with that when he later was saying that, that perhaps it should be mandatory. I can't remember even how to paraphrase his statement, but it was similar to Rothenberg's that it's, poetry absolutely must be written. That is how you take language to its end.
Thinking that there was a September 11th that was really significant in American history before our September 11th, and that was the Pinochet coup in Chile on September 11th, 1973, which is kind of responsible for one of the major bodies of poetic work from Chile since then, because Raúl Zurita was arrested on September 11th and tortured with lots of other people. He lived, a lot of other people did, somewhere between 3,000 and 15,000 people were completely unaccounted for. And the revelations are still, just coming out now from that September 11th. Just 3 days ago, in the New York Times, 2 people were arrested for the murder of Victor Hara, the folk singer. But this major body of work by Wright is his response to that. What do you do when faced by brutality and horror that when you're just a person? And one of the ways is with poetry. All of his poetry, everything that he's written since then, has had to do with facing brutality, with kind of transcendent love, and being able to imagine himself as the other, as the brutal person, as the killer of children.
I'm shifting gears again. This is just what happens with these questions. That's amazing. There are some high school students in the audience, I think. So what advice would you give to high school students who want to write poetry or just starting out?
Lie to your parents. Worry about you.
Read and write. I mean, form a reading club. I would say form a reading club before a writing club. Inform each other. Go deep. If you want to get lost, you have to go deep. And no one can talk you out of it. My father said, "You'll eat paper." I said, "I like paper." It's as good as our cooking at home anyway. I just don't be discouraged. Dig it, as Creedy would say.
And Creedy would say, make a company that it can be a really lonely activity, and you're not going to get a lot of pats on the back from a culture that doesn't quite know what to do with poetry. And so making a company in Creedy's sense, your friends, that you're constantly engaged with each other and talking about the things that you love, that you feel passionate about. And so that's that reading club, or just read and write and do not sleep.
And we're perfect examples of what can happen to you if you become a poet. We have jobs, we have a mortgage, we had a dog, we have a son, we've traveled the world. Poetry has taken us around the world, it's brought us here. Poetry's not over. We keep coming back up that drain. Count us out.
That's always, every once in a while they're like, is poetry dead? Why do people keep saying that?
I don't know, it's boring. It's like a friend of mine says, Paris is dead. I said, oh, really?
Then they said the novel was dead after that. Yeah. And then everyone's dead. Speaking of that, what's the future? What's the future of your poetry, or just poetry in general? Like, you can say what you're working on, or where you want to go. Anything? What's the future?
That's a really hard one. Yeah.
Sorry.
The future's in those younger students who are here. It's what they do with their company and their minds and their burning trees. And I I have no idea what it is, and they don't either yet, to make it happen. But the beautiful thing, yeah, besides, and people always say that work is dead, everything is dead, but the young people keep finding it, and they keep finding it necessary. And I think in a culture that is given, like ours is, to spectacle, that we live in a culture of spectacle, that there's this thing that can take place in the interior of your body, in an intimate relationship, with no spectacle going on, and that it can be transformative, that can be so much more powerful than anything else that you've experienced. That keeps happening to people, and it keeps happening to young people, which is why poetry.
Edie?
Have much better hindsight. Well, I think it does, everything belongs to the next generation, you know, everything is, and you know, I guess what we want to do is pass the torch. And for myself, you know, it's always just, I know I've just got one more good book in me, just one, and then I can just croak just right here and it'll be fine. So, you know, I'm looking forward to the next project, and I don't know what it is yet. And you're always looking forward to trying to learn something else, do it a different way, to open a different portal, you know, to welcome a sort of new lexicon into your immediate environment.
Great. Well, that's sort of the end of my questions. I just wonder if there are any, we have a little bit of time, is there any questions that you guys have that you'd like to ask? I can kind of do a, what is it, Phil Donahue, and like come out in the audience with my microphone. Oh, there's that guy back there.
What's it like to be married and a poet?
What's it like to be married?
Married to another poet.
Yeah. We've talked to other married poets too, and I think the experience can be really different. And I'm not going to speak for both of us, but for myself, it's been a really lucky thing, because you're given to these needs that are particular to the needs of writers, like being able to, you know, go out and stay in your barn for 8 hours on a beautiful day when someone else you might be married to couldn't understand what was wrong with you that you would want to be doing that. And also that we've been really good critics for each other's work because of that sort of honesty, that as first readers of each other's works, I think we have made each other better. So that's been good.
I think I'm much more suited to be married to a poet than an insurance adjuster. You know, I mean, I need someone to have a lifelong conversation with, someone who's passionate about the things I'm passionate about, and who can show me things that I haven't seen, and I can show things that I haven't seen, and there's a mutual interest in it. We've been very stimulating for each other. Which doesn't mean that there aren't lots of irksome things about being married to Forrest. But him being a poet is not one of those.
How about one more question back there?
I was wondering if you could speak a little about the intersection of poetry and scholarship, and I guess for you it would be literary studies, and for you, we've been using the word documentary, but I always think more about anthropology.
About, pardon me?
Anthropology in your work. Is this the intersection of a poetic and a scholarly perspective?
Yeah, I just...
Okay.
I hate those. I really am so disinterested in those borders anymore. I'm really interested in those borders being overrun, and where scholarship and literature and even like music and performance and other things are impregnating each other. And a lot of the writers that I'm most interested in, starting like with Pound, or here in Ypsilanti, someone like Clayton Eshelman, is funneling a lot of scholarship and academic scholarship into poetics. And I do both. I write.
Yeah, I love doing research, but it's not very systematic. But I love throwing myself into the research of something that I'm working on. But my research can go in the form of collecting music that feels somehow relevant, collecting totems, my version of field work, starting a small library that will feed me, films. It's sort of everything starts moving toward filling me with, tools to approach a subject in which I really have to inform myself as an amateur.
Okay, great. Wait, there's one question.
Yeah, I actually kind of have the opposite question, which is, like, is it important for you that your work be relevant to a non-intellectual audience, or I guess people that read for pleasure more than academics or anything?
I don't think writers usually ask who their audience is when they're writing, and I think most writers are writing what they were meant to write or to the best of their ability. And David Anton says, an artist is someone who does the best job they can. So I think if you focus on the other end of it, it's you're really talking about an imaginary partner, and you don't really know who's going to receive the work. I've been very surprised by the range of readership, and I don't think of myself as a particularly obscure writer, though there's some obscure writing that I enjoy and admire, and sometimes envy. I don't think it's the right end to start from.
The most stupendous receptions that I've experienced are in places like Bogota, Colombia, and Nicaragua, with people who are, cultures that are really love poetry and don't make distinctions themselves, aren't hearing work as, that's academic, or but are hearing with just wide open ears what pours into them and what they can feel. I do want to, I believe in poetry being experienced by the body, that it's produced by the body and it's experienced by the body, and that's not mediated by any class or degree of schooling.
Great, well, that's all the time we have. Thank you both so much. There's one other question?
No?
No? Okay. Thank you both. It's a blessing to have you here. And